There's a special kind of cruelty. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't shatter bones or draw blood. Instead, it does something far more insidious. It shatters your reality. It makes you question the very ground you stand on, the memories you hold, the perceptions you trust. Tonight, we're going to explore this invisible violence, this quiet terrorism of the mind, this deliberate cultivation of madness in another human being. They call it gaslighting, named after a 1944 film where a husband systematically convinces his wife she's losing her mind. But the term barely captures the horror of the experience. The slow dissolution of your sanity, the gradual erosion of your confidence in your own mind, the creeping certainty that you can't trust yourself anymore. Picture yourself standing in a room, looking at a red wall. Someone walks in and tells you it's blue. You know it's red. You can see it's red. But they insist, with such confidence, such conviction, that it's blue. And they look at you with concern when you insist it's red. Are you feeling all right? They ask, maybe you need to get your eyes checked. Now imagine this happening not once, but hundreds of times. About small things, big things, everything in between. Your memory of conversations, your emotional reactions, your interpretation of events. Slowly, steadily, relentlessly, they chip away at your reality until you no longer know it's true. This isn't accidental. It's not a misunderstanding or a difference of perspective. It's intentional. It's calculated. It's designed to make you feel crazy on purpose. Because crazy people don't leave relationships. Crazy people don't set boundaries. Crazy people don't trust their own judgment enough to recognize abuse when it's happening to them. The gaslighter knows that if they can control your reality, they can control you completely. If they can make you doubt your own mind, you'll never doubt theirs. If they can convince you that you're the problem, you'll spend all your energy trying to fix yourself instead of recognizing that they're the one who's broken. Close your eyes and feel into this for a moment. The confusion, the self-doubt, the constant second-guessing. The way your confidence slowly leaks away like air from a punctured tire. The way you start to feel like you're going insane, one small doubt at a time. But here's what they don't want you to know. You're not going crazy. You're being driven crazy. There's a difference. One is a medical condition. The other is a crime against your consciousness. One happens to you. The other is done to you, deliberately, methodically, with full knowledge of the damage being caused. The gaslighter is not someone who accidentally confuses you. They are someone who deliberately disorients you. They study your mind the way a burglar studies a house, looking for weak points, vulnerable entry points, places where they can slip in unnoticed and steal what's most precious to you, your ability to trust yourself. They understand that sanity isn't just about mental health. It's about power. The person who gets to define reality gets to control everything that flows from that reality. Your decisions, your relationships, your future, your sense of self. When they convince you that your perceptions are unreliable, they become the sole authority on what's real and what isn't. And in that moment, you become dependent on them not just for love, not just for companionship, but for basic reality testing. You need them to tell you what happened, what it meant, how you should feel about it. You become a stranger to yourself, living in a reality that serves their needs rather than reflecting your truth. Gaslighting doesn't happen overnight. It's built slowly, carefully, like a house of cards. Each lie is placed precisely on top of the last, creating a structure of false reality that seems solid but will collapse the moment you examine it too closely. That's why they make sure you never have the chance to examine it at all. It starts with tiny distortions, small inconsistencies that you notice but dismiss. They said they would call at 8, but now they insist they said 9. They promised to pick up groceries, but now they claim you never asked them to. They told you they loved your new dress, but today they're asking why you bought something so unflattering. Each incident is small enough to let slide. Not worth an argument, easily explained away. I must have misheard, you think. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. Perhaps I'm being too sensitive. These tiny concessions to doubt are exactly what they're counting on. Because once you start questioning one memory, it becomes easier to question them all. The gaslighter is patient. They understand that trust in your own perceptions wasn't built in a day, so it can't be destroyed in a day either. They chip away at it like water wearing down stone, persistent, relentless, almost imperceptible in its daily damage, but devastating in its cumulative effect. They know that memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Every time you remember something, you're rebuilding it from fragments, not playing back a recording. And in that rebuilding process, there's room for suggestion, for influence, for subtle alterations that change the entire meaning of what happened. So they become editors of your past. They revise your history to serve their present needs. They take your memories and rewrite them with themselves as the hero and you as the unreliable narrator. They don't just change what happened. They change what it meant. They don't just alter the facts. They alter your right to have your own interpretation of those facts. Watch how they do it. Notice the language they use. You're remembering that wrong. That's not what I said. You're being dramatic. You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. You're paranoid. Always, the problem is with your perception, never with their behavior. Always, you're the one who's confused, never them. They create a world where your experiences don't matter, where your feelings are invalid, where your memories are unreliable. A world where only their version of events is considered trustworthy, where only their interpretation of situations is considered rational, where only their emotional reactions are considered appropriate. And slowly, quietly, you begin to live in their world instead of your own. You start to see yourself through their eyes. You begin to doubt your own experiences and trust theirs instead. You trade your reality for their version of reality, not realizing that their version was designed to serve them, not to reflect truth. This is the architecture of unreality, built one small doubt at a time, constructed from your own confusion, maintained by your growing dependence on their interpretation of your experiences. A prison made entirely of questions about your own sanity. The foundation of this false reality is laid through what psychologists call reality testing impairment. They systematically undermine your ability to distinguish between what's real and what's not. They create enough confusion around basic facts that you start to doubt your capacity to perceive accurately at all. They might deny conversations that happened just hours ago, insist they never made promises you clearly remember them making, claim they told you things they never said. Each denial is delivered with such conviction that you start to wonder if perhaps your memory really is as unreliable as they suggest. But here's something beautiful about the human spirit. It rebels against false realities. Your body knows. Your nervous system knows. Even when your mind is confused, your intuition keeps trying to tell you the truth. The tension in your shoulders when they speak, the knot in your stomach when they explain away your concerns, the way your heart races when they start to rewrite history. Your body is keeping score, even when your mind has been convinced to stop counting. And that's your way out. That's your connection to truth when everything else feels uncertain. Listen to your body. Trust your physical responses. They haven't been colonized by doubt the way your thoughts have been. The architecture of unreality requires constant maintenance. It needs ongoing reinforcement, fresh lies to support old ones, new revisions to cover up previous contradictions. And it's most vulnerable when you step outside of it, when you gain some distance, when you start to see the structure from the outside rather than living within it. The gaslighter has a special language, a vocabulary designed to dismiss, diminish, and destabilize. They've learned which words make you question yourself, which phrases make you feel small, which tones make you doubt your own perceptions. And they use this language like a surgeon uses a scalpel, with precision and devastating effect. You're being too emotional. This phrase is designed to make you feel ashamed of having feelings at all. It suggests that emotions are weakness, that feeling deeply is somehow wrong. It forces you to choose between your authentic emotional response and their approval. And most people, desperate to maintain connection, will sacrifice their emotions rather than risk losing the relationship. The genius of this phrase is that it pathologizes normal human responses to abnormal situations. When someone treats you poorly and you get upset, they don't address their poor treatment. Instead, they make your upset the problem. Suddenly, you're not discussing their behavior. You're defending your right to have feelings about their behavior. You're overreacting. This one minimizes your response while positioning them as the reasonable one. It doesn't matter what they did. What matters is that your reaction to it was inappropriate. It shifts the focus from their behavior to your response, making you the problem instead of them. Suddenly, you're not discussing what they did wrong. You're defending your right to be upset about it. The phrase implies that there's a correct level of reaction to their behavior, and they get to decide what that level is. It makes you question not just what happened, but whether your response to what happened is appropriate. It colonizes not just your memory, but your emotional reactions too. That never happened, the most direct form of gaslighting. A flat denial of your reality. Not, I remember it differently, or that's not how I saw it, but a complete erasure of your experience. As if your memory is so unreliable that events you clearly remember simply didn't occur at all. This phrase is particularly devastating because it doesn't just question your interpretation of events. It denies the events themselves. It suggests that your mind is so fundamentally unreliable that it creates entire experiences that never occurred. It makes you doubt not just your memory, but your sanity. You're being paranoid. This one is particularly insidious because it pathologizes your intuition. It suggests that your ability to sense something wrong is actually a mental health issue. It makes you afraid to trust your instincts because doing so might mean you're crazy. It weaponizes mental health stigma against your own self-protection mechanisms. Paranoia is actually a survival mechanism. It's your mind's way of protecting you from potential threats. When someone calls you paranoid for noticing their inconsistencies, for questioning their motives, for sensing that something isn't right, they're asking you to disable your own protective instincts. I was just joking. The classic minimization technique. Whatever cruel thing they said, whatever hurtful thing they did, it was all in good fun. And if you're hurt by it, well, that's your problem. You don't have a sense of humor. You can't take a joke. You're too sensitive. The cruelty disappears behind the shield of humor, and your pain becomes evidence of your deficiency. This phrase is particularly manipulative because it reframes their cruelty as your inability to appreciate humor. It makes their harmful behavior your fault for not understanding their innocent intentions. It suggests that the problem isn't what they said or did, but your reaction to what they said or did. You're too sensitive. This one attacks your emotional capacity directly. It suggests that your ability to feel deeply is a flaw, not a strength. That your emotional responses are excessive rather than appropriate. That you need to toughen up rather than they need to be kinder. But sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. It allows you to pick up on subtleties others miss, to empathize deeply with others' experiences, to respond appropriately to emotional situations. When someone tells you that you're too sensitive, they're really saying that your ability to feel is inconvenient to their ability to harm you without consequences. Listen to how they use these phrases. Notice the timing. They don't deploy them randomly. They use them strategically when you're most vulnerable, when you're trying to address a legitimate concern, when you're setting a boundary they don't want to respect. They've learned that certain words have power over you, that certain phrases make you shrink back, make you doubt yourself, make you abandon your position. And they use these words like weapons, aimed precisely at your most vulnerable spots. But here's what they don't want you to realize. These phrases only work if you accept their premise. You're being too emotional only has power if you believe that emotions are bad. You're overreacting only hurts if you accept that your reactions need their approval. That never happened only works if you're willing to sacrifice your memory for their comfort. You can reject their vocabulary. You can refuse to speak their language of invalidation. You can insist on your right to feel what you feel, remember what you remember, react how you react. You can say, I'm not being too emotional. I'm being appropriately emotional about an inappropriate situation. You can say, I'm not overreacting. You're under-responding to the harm you've caused. The vocabulary of invalidation loses its power when you refuse to be invalidated, when you trust your own experience more than their interpretation of it, when you remember that your reality doesn't need their approval to be real. The gaslighter knows that their version of reality can only survive in isolation. Like a delicate plant that can only grow in darkness, their manipulation requires that you be cut off from other perspectives, other voices, other versions of truth. So they begin, subtly and systematically, to isolate you from anyone who might validate your perceptions or question theirs. It starts with gentle discouragement. Your friends don't really understand you, they suggest. Your family has always been critical of your choices. Your coworkers are jealous of your relationship. Slowly, they plant seeds of doubt about the people who care about you, making you question whether their concern is genuine or motivated by ulterior motives. They don't forbid you from seeing these people. That would be too obvious, too controlling. Instead, they make it unpleasant. They create drama before social events. They pick fights right before you're supposed to meet friends. They sulk when you come home from family gatherings. They make you pay an emotional price for maintaining other relationships. And because you want peace, because you want harmony, because you love them and want them to be happy, you start to make excuses. You skip the dinner with friends. You avoid the family reunion. You decline the invitation to your coworker's birthday party. It's easier than dealing with their mood, their accusations, their emotional punishment. But isolation serves another purpose. It removes witnesses. When there's no one else around to observe their behavior, it becomes easier for them to rewrite history. There's no one to confirm your version of events, no one to validate your perceptions, no one to remind you that their behavior is not normal. In isolation, they become your only source of reality, your only mirror for understanding yourself, your only interpreter of your experiences. And that's exactly where they want you, dependent on their version of truth, because you have no other version to compare it to. The isolation protocol is sophisticated. It doesn't just remove people from your life. It removes perspectives. They discourage you from reading certain books, watching certain shows, listening to certain podcasts that might give you language for your experiences or validate your perceptions. They create an information bubble around you where their voice is the loudest, their interpretation is the most frequent, their version of reality is the most available. They flood your mental space with their perspective until there's no room for any other viewpoint. They may also engage in what's called proxy gaslighting. They recruit others to participate in the denial of your reality, often without those people realizing they're being used. They tell your friends that you've been really stressed lately and might be imagining things. They express concern to your family about your mental state. They position themselves as the worried, caring partner of someone who's clearly struggling. And your support network, genuinely caring about you, begins to see you through their lens. They start to question your perceptions, your reactions, your version of events. Not because they don't love you, but because they've been fed a narrative about your instability, your oversensitivity, your tendency to blow things out of proportion. This is perhaps the cruelest aspect of gaslighting. It turns your own support system against you. The people who should be validating your reality start questioning it instead. The relationships that should provide refuge become sources of additional doubt. The voices that should be defending you start suggesting you might be wrong. In this echo chamber of doubt, the gaslighter's version of reality seems more and more plausible. If everyone is questioning your perceptions, maybe your perceptions really are flawed. If everyone is concerned about your mental state, maybe you really are losing your mind. If everyone thinks you're overreacting, maybe you really are too sensitive. But isolation also creates desperation. When you have no one else to talk to, no one else to validate your experiences, you become more dependent on the very person who's destroying your reality. You cling to them because they're all you have left, even though they're the one who took everyone else away. This is the isolation protocol. Systematic removal of external reality checks. Deliberate destruction of your support network. Careful cultivation of dependence on their interpretation of your experiences. They become your only source of information about yourself, your only mirror for understanding your reality. The protocol works because it exploits our fundamental need for connection and belonging. Humans are social creatures. We need others to reflect our experiences back to us, to validate our perceptions, to confirm that we're not alone in our understanding of reality. When that social confirmation is removed, we become vulnerable to accepting false realities rather than facing complete isolation. But isolation can only be maintained if you allow it. You can reach out, you can reconnect, you can seek other perspectives. You can risk their displeasure to maintain your connections to people who knew you before they began rewriting your story. And when you do, when you finally talk to someone who remembers the person you were before the gaslighting began, you might be surprised by what you hear. You seem different, they might say. You used to be so confident. You question yourself constantly now. You seem afraid to have opinions. These observations aren't criticisms, they're mirrors. Reflections of what you've lost in the process of accepting someone else's version of your reality. And they're invitations to remember who you were before someone convinced you that you were someone else. One of the most maddening aspects of gaslighting is the web of contradictions the gaslighter creates. They don't just lie to you. They lie in ways that contradict their previous lies. They don't just rewrite history. They rewrite it differently each time. They create a reality so internally inconsistent that trying to make sense of it becomes an exercise in madness. Today they tell you they never said they loved you. Last week they insisted they said it every day. Yesterday they claimed you were too needy for wanting to hear it. Tomorrow they'll accuse you of not believing them when they express their love. Each version of events contradicts the others, but they present each one with absolute conviction. This isn't accidental confusion. This is strategic chaos. Because when reality is constantly shifting, when truth is always changing, when nothing can be counted on to remain consistent, you stop trying to make sense of it. You surrender your need for logical coherence. You accept that nothing they say has to align with anything else they've said. And in that surrender, you lose something crucial: your ability to think critically about their behavior. When you stop expecting consistency, you stop noticing inconsistency. When you stop demanding logical coherence, you stop recognizing when you're being lied to. When you accept that their version of reality changes based on convenience rather than truth, you stop believing in objective truth at all. The contradiction spiral is designed to overwhelm your cognitive resources. Your brain works hard to make sense of conflicting information. It tries to find patterns, to create coherent narratives, to reconcile contradictory data. But when someone is deliberately feeding you contradictory information, your brain becomes exhausted from the effort. This cognitive exhaustion makes you more susceptible to manipulation. When your mind is tired from trying to make sense of nonsense, you become less able to resist new lies, less capable of maintaining your own version of reality, less equipped to protect yourself from further manipulation. They might tell you they hate drama while creating it constantly. They might insist they value honesty while lying to you regularly. They might claim they want you to be independent while sabotaging your autonomy at every turn. They might say they love you while treating you with contempt. The words and actions never align, but they expect you to believe both simultaneously. And when you point out these contradictions, they don't acknowledge them. They don't explain them. They don't resolve them. Instead, they attack your need for consistency as evidence of your rigidity, your inability to understand nuance, your tendency to keep score of their mistakes. You learn to live with cognitive dissonance, to hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously, to accept that someone can love you and hurt you, cherish you and discard you, promise you everything and give you nothing. You adapt to living in a reality where nothing has to make sense, where contradictions are normal, where chaos is the only constant. But this adaptation comes at a cost. When you stop expecting consistency from them, you stop expecting it from yourself. When you accept their contradictions, you begin to doubt your own need for logical coherence. When you surrender your right to a reality that makes sense, you lose your ability to recognize when something doesn't make sense. The contradiction spiral creates what psychologists call learned helplessness. When you can't predict what will happen based on past experience, when cause and effect seem random, when nothing you do seems to create consistent results, you stop trying to influence outcomes at all. You become passive, accepting whatever version of reality they present because you've given up on being able to determine what's true. They might promise to change and then continue the same harmful behaviors. They might apologize sincerely and then repeat the exact actions they apologized for. They might claim they want to work on the relationship while actively sabotaging any progress. Each contradiction is presented as if it's perfectly reasonable, as if the previous position never existed. The spiral also serves to exhaust your allies. Friends and family members who try to help you make sense of the situation become frustrated by the constantly changing story. They can't offer consistent advice because the problems keep shifting. Eventually, they may withdraw their support, not because they don't care, but because they can't follow the twisted logic of the situation. This leaves you even more isolated and dependent on the gaslighter's interpretation of events. When the only consistent thing about their behavior is its inconsistency, you start to crave any kind of stability, even if it comes from accepting their version of reality. The contradiction spiral is designed to break your logical thinking, to make you so confused that you stop trying to understand, to overwhelm you with inconsistencies until you give up your need for things to add up, to exhaust your cognitive resources until you can no longer think clearly about what's happening to you. But contradiction is actually evidence. When someone's story keeps changing, when their words don't match their actions, when their behavior contradicts their stated values, that's information. That's data. That's your logical mind trying to tell you something important. This person is not trustworthy. Your need for consistency isn't rigidity. It's sanity. Your desire for their words and actions to align isn't unreasonable. It's basic human decency. Your expectation that someone who claims to love you will treat you lovingly isn't asking too much. It's asking for the bare minimum. Don't let them convince you that your standards for consistency are too high. Don't let them train you to accept contradiction as normal. Don't let them exhaust your ability to think logically about their behavior. Your mind's need for things to make sense is not a weakness. It's a strength, and it's one of your best defenses against manipulation. The gaslighter creates what can only be described as a reality distortion field around themselves. Like a black hole bends light, they bend truth, warp perception, and distort the very fabric of what seems real and possible. Inside this field, normal rules don't apply. Cause and effect become scrambled. Your emotional responses become inappropriate. Your memories become unreliable. Your perceptions become symptoms of your instability. In their reality distortion field, they are always the victim, and you are always the perpetrator. No matter what they do to you, somehow you did something worse to them. No matter how they hurt you, somehow you hurt them first. No matter how unreasonable their behavior, somehow your response to it is more unreasonable. They've mastered the art of Darvo: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. When confronted with their harmful behavior, they deny it happened. When you persist in addressing it, they attack your credibility, your mental state, your motives. And finally, they reverse the roles entirely, positioning themselves as the victim of your accusations, and you as the abuser for making them. In this distorted reality, setting boundaries becomes controlling them. Defending yourself becomes attacking them. Having needs becomes being needy. Expressing hurt becomes being dramatic. Asking for accountability becomes being unreasonable. Every normal, healthy response to their abnormal, unhealthy behavior gets reframed as evidence of your dysfunction. The reality distortion field is maintained through constant revision of recent history. What happened yesterday gets rewritten today. What they said last week gets denied this week. What they promised last month gets claimed to have been your misunderstanding. The past becomes as fluid and changeable as the present, always being edited to serve their current narrative. They don't just distort your shared reality. They distort your private reality too. They tell you what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you mean when you say things. They become the expert on your own internal experience, insisting they know your motivations better than you do, your emotions better than you feel them, your thoughts better than you think them. You don't really mean that. You're just saying that because you're angry. You don't actually feel that way. You're only upset because of your issues from childhood. They colonize not just your external reality, but your internal landscape too, making you doubt not just what happened, but what you think and feel about what happened. In their reality distortion field, your pain is always your fault. Your hurt is always self-inflicted. Your problems are always your own creation. They become an innocent bystander to the drama you're creating, a victim of the chaos you're generating, a martyr to the difficulties you're producing. The field operates through what psychologists call projection. Whatever they're doing to you, they accuse you of doing to them. If they're lying, they call you dishonest. If they're manipulating, they call you controlling. If they're being cruel, they call you mean. They take their own toxic behaviors and project them onto you, making you defend against accusations that actually describe their actions, not yours. This distortion field is so complete, so all-encompassing, that it can be difficult to remember what reality was like before you entered it. It's like being underwater. Everything looks different, sounds different, feels different. The normal rules of physics don't seem to apply. You forget what it's like to breathe normally, to see clearly, to move without resistance. But reality distortion fields require constant maintenance. They need ongoing energy to sustain them. They have to be reinforced regularly with new lies, fresh denials, updated revisions of history. And they're most vulnerable when you step outside of them, when you gain some distance, when you get an external perspective. When you leave their presence, when you talk to other people, when you write down what actually happened, the distortion field begins to lose its power. Reality starts to reassert itself. The normal rules of cause and effect begin to apply again. Your perceptions start to feel trustworthy. Your emotions start to feel valid. This is why they work so hard to keep you isolated, to prevent you from talking to others, to discourage you from keeping records of what actually happens. Because the reality distortion field can only be maintained in isolation. It cannot survive contact with objective reality. The field is also vulnerable to documentation. When you write down what they said, when you keep track of what actually happened, when you create a record that can't be revised or reinterpreted, the distortion begins to crack. The lies become harder to maintain. The contradictions become more obvious. The pattern becomes undeniable. Your memory might be fallible, but your journal isn't. Your perceptions might be questioned, but your recordings aren't. Your version of events might be disputed, but your documentation speaks for itself. This is why keeping records is so important when dealing with gaslighting. Not to prove anything to them, but to prove something to yourself. That your reality is real, your experiences are valid, your perceptions are trustworthy. The reality distortion field also affects your relationship with time. Past, present, and future become blurred. Yesterday's promises are forgotten. Today's problems are blamed on your past issues. Tomorrow's plans are held hostage to your current compliance. Time becomes another tool of manipulation, stretched and compressed to serve their narrative. They might bring up mistakes you made years ago to deflect from their current behavior. They might promise change in the future to avoid accountability in the present. They might rewrite the past to justify their current actions. In their distorted field, time flows backward and forward as needed to support their version of events. But here's the beautiful truth about reality. It's resilient. No matter how distorted it becomes in someone else's field of manipulation, it always exists, waiting for you to remember it, to return to it, to trust it again. Your authentic self, your true perceptions, your real memories, they're all there, buried perhaps under layers of doubt and confusion, but intact and accessible. The journey back to your own reality begins with a single revolutionary act: believing yourself. Not because you can prove it to others, not because you have evidence that would hold up in court, not because you can convince them that your version is correct, but simply because it's yours, because you lived it, because you experienced it, because you are the ultimate authority on your own life. Start small. Start with things you know for certain. The color of your favorite shirt, the taste of your morning coffee, the sound of rain on your window. These simple, undeniable truths become anchors in the storm of gaslighting. They remind you that you are capable of accurate perception, that your senses work, that your reality is valid. Then work your way up to bigger truths, the way their words made you feel, the pattern you've noticed in their behavior, the promises they made and broke, the times they denied saying things you clearly remember them saying. Trust your experience of these events, even if they insist your experience is wrong. Your body is one of your greatest allies in this process. It holds memories that can't be gaslit. It responds to truth in ways that can't be manipulated. When someone's words don't match their actions, your body knows. When someone's claiming to love you while treating you badly, your nervous system responds to the contradiction. Pay attention to your physical responses. The knot in your stomach when they start to explain away their behavior. The tension in your shoulders when they deny something you know happened. The way your heart races when they begin to rewrite history. Your body is speaking truth to you in a language that can't be translated into their vocabulary of invalidation. Recovery from gaslighting is like regaining your vision after being in darkness for a long time. At first, everything seems too bright, too clear, almost overwhelming. You might find yourself doubting your own recovery, wondering if perhaps you really were too sensitive, too dramatic, too unstable. This is normal. This is your mind adjusting to truth after being fed lies for so long. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your healing process. Recovery isn't linear. There will be days when you slip back into self-doubt, when their voice in your head seems louder than your own. This doesn't mean you're not making progress. It means you're human, and humans heal in spirals, not straight lines. The process of reclaiming your reality is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means accepting that someone you trusted was deliberately harming you. Liberating because it means you're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. The relief of discovering that your perceptions were accurate all along can be overwhelming. Seek out relationships with people who reflect your authentic self back to you. People who knew you before the gaslighting began. People who remember your strengths, your wisdom, your intuitive abilities. People who validate your perceptions without needing proof. People who believe you because you're telling them your truth. These relationships serve as reality anchors, reminding you of who you are when you're not being systematically undermined. They reflect back your competence, your intelligence, your emotional stability. They show you that the problems you experienced in the gaslighting relationship don't exist in your other relationships. Remember that you don't need to prove your reality to anyone. You don't need to convince others that your version of events is correct. You don't need to gather evidence to justify your own experiences. Your reality doesn't require external validation to be real. It exists because you experienced it. It matters because it happened to you. The gaslighter convinced you that you were crazy on purpose. They needed you to doubt your sanity so you wouldn't trust your judgment. They needed you to question your perceptions so you wouldn't question their behavior. They needed you to feel unstable so you wouldn't recognize that they were the source of the instability. But you were never crazy. You were being made to feel crazy. There's a difference. One is a condition that happens to you. The other is a crime that's committed against you. One suggests something wrong with your mind. The other reveals something wrong with their character. You survived something that was designed to break you. The fact that you're questioning your own experience is actually evidence of your strength, not your weakness. It means you haven't completely surrendered your critical thinking. It means some part of you still knows that something was wrong, even if you can't quite put your finger on what it was. Trust that part of yourself. Listen to that inner voice that whispers doubts about their version of reality. Honor the part of you that kept track of inconsistencies, even when you were told to ignore them. Celebrate the resilience that kept your authentic self alive, even when it was under constant attack. The healing process involves rebuilding your relationship with your own mind, learning to trust your thoughts again, respecting your emotions, honoring your intuition, believing your memories. It's like learning to walk again after being told for months or years that you didn't know how to use your own legs. Start keeping a journal. Write down what happens, how it makes you feel, what you think about it. This creates an external record that can't be revised or reinterpreted. It helps you see patterns that might be invisible when you're living through them day by day. It gives you evidence of your own experience that exists outside of your potentially gaslit memory. Practice trusting small decisions. What do you want for lunch? What movie do you want to watch? What song do you want to hear? These tiny exercises in self-trust help rebuild your confidence in your own preferences and judgments. They remind you that you are capable of knowing what you want and making decisions for yourself. Learn to recognize the difference between doubt and intuition. Doubt feels heavy, confused, circular. Intuition feels light, clear, directional. Doubt asks endless questions without seeking answers. Intuition provides answers, even when you don't like what they're telling you. The truth is this: they made you feel crazy on purpose because your sanity was threatening to them. Your clarity was dangerous to their manipulation. Your perceptions were inconvenient to their narrative. Your reality was incompatible with their control. But reality always wins in the end. Truth always surfaces eventually. And you, beautiful soul, you are finally remembering who you were before someone convinced you that you were someone else. You are coming home to yourself. You are reclaiming your right to trust your own mind, your own heart, your own experience. The gaslighter's power was always borrowed from you. They convinced you to doubt yourself so you would trust them instead. But now you know the truth. Now you see the pattern. Now you understand that their version of reality was designed to serve them, not to reflect what actually happened. You are not crazy. You never were crazy. You were just made to feel that way by someone who needed you to doubt your sanity, so you wouldn't trust your judgment about their character. But you can trust your judgment. You can believe your memories. You can validate your own experiences. Welcome back to reality. Welcome back to yourself. Welcome back to the truth you always knew, but were convinced to doubt. You are wiser now, stronger now, more aware now. And you will never again mistake manipulation for love, control for care, or gaslighting for genuine concern. The madness was never yours. It was theirs, projected onto you, imposed upon you, forced into your reality until you couldn't tell the difference anymore. But now you can. Now you know. Now you see. And in seeing clearly, you set yourself free. Free to trust your own mind. Free to believe your own experiences. Free to live in a reality that honors your truth instead of serving someone else's lies. The journey back to sanity is not just about recovering from what they did to you. It's about discovering who you are when you're not being systematically undermined. It's about remembering your own wisdom, your own strength, your own beautiful, reliable, trustworthy mind. You were never the problem. You were never too sensitive. You were never crazy. You were just human, trying to make sense of an inhuman situation, trying to find logic in deliberate chaos, trying to maintain your sanity while someone systematically attempted to destroy it. But you survived. You endured. You preserved some essential part of yourself, even when everything else was being dismantled. And now you're rebuilding, not just back to where you were, but forward to who you're becoming. Stronger, wiser, more aware, more compassionate toward yourself and others who have walked this difficult path. The gaslighter may have won many battles, but you've won the war. You've reclaimed your mind, your reality, your right to trust yourself. And that victory, once achieved, can never be taken from you again.